Yeah, I don't know. Okay,
We're
let me.
we're really gonna have this Halloween banner above us.
Yeah, why not? Okay, let's go. In three, two, one. Hello, guys. Welcome to the Bomb Squad. What is going on? I'm all different, but the same. This is our video. First attempt at our video podcast. We're doing it because
It's
we're
going so well. Look at
it's
us.
yeah, we didn't you can by the sound and the quality of our episode, you can tell that we are doing spectacular. So yeah, we got copyright striked a couple of times, and like we're clearly just doing reviews. So like there's a point where you can't fight them anymore. Um, and I'll be as annoying as I can, but every once in a while you just kind of get trapped. And so we're gonna try this, see if it really makes any kind of a difference. And so also, in case you didn't see this beautiful banner we have, so like Avatar, you can't even tell that we're using a green screen background. Um, we are doing our oh no, this isn't even our countdown to Halloween. This is during the Halloween episode. Well, guys, clearly we're on top of the ball. I clearly had a thing ready, so whatever. But anyway, we're this is our first Halloween episode and also our 50th subscriber on YouTube extravaganza. So we picked a very special movie that that maybe you guys have seen, and maybe this one is one that you guys probably don't like. But we're here to tell you that it's not that bad. So
I
today we're
bet most
covering.
people just haven't seen it and heard it was bad, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I feel like that is the case, but we'll get into
Yeah.
it. So today we're covering the 2000 film Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, the sequel to the cult phenomenon, The Blair Witch. This movie is was not directed by the original creators, Eduardo Sanchez, who is Hispanic. But it was directed by Joe Berlinger, and it was written by Dick Baby. No, his name is Dick Beebe, which is not better, but good for you, Dick Beebe. Good for you for having that name and continuing to have any sort of career. You wrote House on Haunted Hill. No wonder I like this movie. Anyway, it also stars Burn Notice's own Jeffrey Donovan, Erica Learson, which you'll know from another great movie we covered, the Texas Chainsaw remake. And also, it stars Lanny Flaherty as the best on-screen sheriff I've ever seen in my whole entire life. Josh, explain to us what this movie's about.
This is a movie about seeing the Texas, or no, not the Texas Chainsaw. This
We're
is
off to a great start.
this is a movie about seeing the Blair Witch Project.
It definitely does not sound like we're both in a tunnel where we're clipping constantly.
Yeah, look at my body.
I know.
But anyway,
Woo!
no, it's about some teens who've seen the Blair Witch Project. They were swept up in the hype, and they go on a Blair Witch tour, but things are not what they seem in the town of wherever the Blair Witch takes place,
Blair Witch
Burkittsville.
Blair
Um, we,
Witchington.
we should also clarify
Okay,
we
Josh,
watched
you should try to lower your phone a little bit because it is clipping bad.
lower it how.
Like just lower the volume. That lowers the volume
Oh,
of the.
oh man. Well, now I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to
that's
pick it up.
okay,
Is this
guys.
better?
Yeah, that's way better.
Ah.
Try not to scream at the top of your lung.
Well, we should clarify. We watched the Blair Witch Project, the first one, but didn't do a
Yes.
podcast on it, kind of to
We
get ready because I'd never seen it before.
well, and to yeah, like so originally we were going to do the Blair Witch, but here's a hot take from the Bomb Squad. Neither of us really like the Blair Witch. I feel
I
like I
I really
saw
like about 10 minutes of it.
yeah, I like about 30
Yeah,
good minutes. And
yeah.
I saw it in theaters at the height of its hysteria. Like well, I guess I saw it right before it became a cult classic. Like it came out here and it was already like you knew that the kids were missing, but we weren't even still sure if it was like if they were really missing or not. But anyway, all I know is that I watched it and I was like, that's it. And then I watched it again last week because we were gonna cover it, and then I was like, oh yeah, that is it. And it is better on the second time. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like you had to have been kind of coming up in horror at that time to really appreciate it, you know?
Yeah, and I am seeing it after we actually just saw a much better kind of like found footage movie, The House That October Built. So it's
Yeah.
like I'm going to compare it negatively, and I know it's like it was first, it was 20 years ago, but it's very like, oh, this is just a lot of them arguing in the woods unscripted, and it's kind of tedious. Whereas this is heavily scripted, and not all of it works, but you appreciate like what it's going for, you know.
Yeah, let me do another recap. So Josh said it's about some teens who are obsessed with the Blair Witch and then they go hunting for it. But just to keep in perspective, this movie takes place in the real world. So in the movie universe, the Blair Witch is a movie that became a huge phenomenon, and these kids are obsessed with the actual Blair Witch movie that we also saw. And two, none of these kids are teens in any way. Like they're all like at least 25. One
There,
of
yeah.
them, two of them are married. But yeah, so okay, so that's just some context. And I gotta say, Josh, what did you think about this? How did you feel about this book of shadows? I gotta say that the video does make me want to do more voices, and I usually
oh, oh, good. I think it does fall apart, but I do think it's pretty solid, way more solid than you would expect from being what it is. I think
yeah.
Jeffrey Donovan really kind of carries it. I think he's just innately charming. Um, so I think that really does help.
Well,
But
okay, so here's the thing. I liked this movie when I first saw it, and I've always been a defender of this movie up until I saw it again. No, I think okay, first of all, let's just commend because what the production history of this movie is that nobody expected Blair Witch to blow up the way it did, but they did, and so Artisan Entertainment like try to rush a sequel. And they were like, okay, well, we don't want to do a sequel. The original directors, they actually wanted the hype to diminish. And then Artisan was like, do you understand how Hollywood works?
and
So,
what's fun, like you could totally see how because Paranormal Activity did that, where it's like the sequels are just kind of worse remakes of the first one.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
and
they,
I respect this movie for not doing that at all.
yeah, like, so the original creators were like, okay, well, we don't want to do that. So they took off and then they brought on Joe Berlinger. And Joe Berlinger was like, okay, well, what if I make the sequel like a meta sequel about the hype and everything? And yeah, I gotta say, that's a fucking like to jump on a movie after the original creators didn't want to do it to probably one of the biggest movies of the year and just be like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna Gremlins to this film.
to kind of
is
like shit on people who love it too, in a way.
Well, I
You
think
know?
that like because okay, to me, and I think to a lot of people who didn't like, even if you don't necessarily like the Blair Witch, you do like the production history behind it, like the way they marketed it. Like they pretended like, oh, these kids are really missing, and they made the actors like kind of go into hiding. And so like to a lot of people, that's more of the story about how they like marketed this movie as opposed to like the movie itself. Like I've never read an article or had a discussion about the Blair Witch that doesn't go into that kind of marketing part of it. And so it is a big part of the film's story. So it's not just like, oh, Joe Berlinger wanted to shit on this movie. It's more that like they really wanted to like approach it from a different angle, and I do appreciate the angle that they chose, even though I can understand why fans who wanted to see like a bunch of other people go back into the woods, like I can understand why they didn't like it, but I commend that it did that. Like, good for you guys. And then okay, so yeah, so Jeremy Donovan plays like this guy who's like obsessed with the Blair Witch, and he's taking these people on tours of the locations of the filming locations,
We
and
should really
on
explain his life, by the way. He's
oh, well, we'll get to it. But on
okay.
the trip is like two documentarian filmmakers who are doing a documentary on the um like on the hysteria following the movie. And then there's also a witch who's a Wiccan who's like there to prove that witches aren't that bad.
She's
And
very
then
like Tumblr, like before there was a Tumblr where she's like,
yeah,
"Hey, you're unfairly stereotyping all witches," and it's kind of a funny thing. Like,
yeah. And then there's Kim. And also again, like Jeffrey Donovan plays Jeff, Stephen Baker Turner plays Stephen, Erica Lerser plays Erica, and Kim Director plays Kim. Like they did the same "we're gonna keep your first name" thing. But then you have Kim, and she's like a goth girl. And one of the first things that I like about this movie is that it kind of really like makes you it kind of gets into the spirit of like Halloween or a haunted house where you like they all get along, like not in a like they're trying to figure each other out, or it's more like, oh, I'm never gonna see you again, so there's really no reason to be rude. Like let's all just have a fun time.
you kind of like a teen road trip camaraderie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a field trip, exactly. Like, oh, well, we're just all stuck together, so might as well like just make the best of this. And so I really like their dynamic of how they're all trying to learn about each other. Like there's no one who's judgmental or kind of mean. And yeah, I really like that about them. And so they're all going on this tour of all these places, and then they go to sleep because then Jeffrey Donovan is like, oh, by the way, I run let's get into him. I run a store that sells like all the stuff, like the Blair Witch stuff, like sticks and stuff. And then I also am obsessed with the movie. Also, I have a camera to like record our whole trip. Also, I have a house that's still in the Blair Witch Woods that has a bunch of like stolen property that I sell to scalpers. And also a bunch more camera equipment so that we're always on camera despite what happens in the
No,
story.
it's not a house. It's an abandoned factory that he bought for $1 to live
Yes.
in after he got out of a mental asylum for an unrelated issue.
And he's also, yeah, he's left the mental asylum. And that's why the sheriff, Ronald Craven,
Oh, I saw that.
has like a really like he has a little love bug for Jeffrey. And he's like every time he calls, he's like, I tell you what, I'm going to find you and arrest you next time I see you. I tell you what. And it's like, is Tracy Morgan doing the voice for
And
this?
he also has a bridge. It's the only way in and out of his factory home.
Right.
And his alarm is fake guard dogs barking to scare people. It's like he's like Tyler Durden if he was a real
Right.
person.
Because as we all know, factories will always have bridges to get into them because you don't ever need a bunch of people moving in and out of a factory.
You don't need a truck to pull up to load or unload things. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So they're like the first part of it is this them getting to know each other. They're like becoming friends, and they're like, oh, here's what I believe in, blah blah blah. And so they go around the like camp and they find. I do like that. My favorite thing about either Blair Witch movie is that I like the lore of the Blair Witch. Like, oh, she causes you to go crazy and like kill your neighbor or whatever. And they jump more into that by explaining more of it. And so they're just kind of like all learning about it, and you kind of get another briefing on the Blair
And
Witch.
apparently it's very, because I was reading like the trivia how it's very dedicated to the lore. They'll be like, oh, when he's in the asylum, the background is a reference to the novelization that came out between the two movies. It's like this is for 10 people.
Yeah.
No one knows what
Espe-
that is, but
Especially now when it's like, is the website even still active?
I know.
Um,
But I do like because when they're going around in the woods, they're the Blair Witch Hunt, and they run into a different fake tour called the Blair
yeah.
Witch Walk, and they get into like a scuffle. And I'm like, that's pretty funny. Like
And like,
competing characters.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. And at the beginning, I forgot to mention this, they do like interviews with real members of the real town talking about how annoying it's been since the Blair Witch came out with people just like going through the woods. And I thought that that was funny because that really happened. Like the town people did complain about all of this
Yeah,
stuff.
it's like the '90s version of Forks, Washington for Twilight, where they're just like,
Yeah,
"Leave us alone. We're like a thirty
right.
thousand person town." I'll say they showed a lot of real news footage, and they had like Kurt Loder and stuff. I was like, "Oh man,
Yeah,
what a
remember
blast from
Coat
the past!"
Loader? So
Yeah,
yeah, so then they run into those people and then they're like, let's all go to sleep. And so they all go to sleep and they wake up the next day and all their shit is destroyed. And also there's a big tree in the middle of the house. They're at the original witch's house, and there's a big tree in the middle of it, and they're like, well, that's a weird tree. Hey guys, let's all look at this tree and make note of it because it's weird. And it's definitely not just a tree.
yeah.
And
Like they
so
wouldn't build this tree. They wouldn't build a house like near this tree, kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's
And
too close.
so
They
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 wake.
also their stuff isn't just destroyed. All their papers are so shredded it's raining paper on them as they wake up. It's not
which
trying
is
to be like
which
realistic,
is a cool image, yeah.
Yeah, no, it looks cool.
And so yeah, so they do this, and then and then they're like, what the hell happened? So then like Jeffrey's like, oh, let's all go back to my house. I have a bunch of editing equipment. We can figure it out. And so they're all like, every single one of them is like, oh, let's do that. I definitely want to go to this clearly unhinged guy's house.
Yeah,
So
there is a lot of arguments about coffee in the middle of this. When he's just going through the footage, a lot of it's just them arguing about who needs to make or get coffee.
oh
Um,
yeah, okay. So when they get back, so they all get to his house, and like they're all clearly disturbed and like kind of freaked out, and they're all acting a little bit strange. But for some reason, the director was like, Jeffrey, every time a character looks at you, you're gonna mention that you want coffee, and you're gonna ask one of the women to go get it. And I don't know why they did that. Like it doesn't ever play into any larger thing.
Yeah, it's well, I also got the sense this did feel to me, and apparently the director kind of confirmed it that it was like heavily edited after he left it, and I
Right.
almost wonder if it was a weird like that was a carryover from when that led to something, and you definitely do feel like you could see the studio like muddling this one, like especially in the second half.
Yeah, yeah. And so like yeah, so then they like start checking the tapes and like and here's the payoff because they start watching the tapes and that big tree is now like a little branch and they're like, how did that tree get so small? And so then they're trying to like figure everything out and like but they're not that freaked out yet. They're just like, what's going on? And like so then like the goth girl goes to get some beers at the store and everyone's real rude to her and they're like, get out of here. And so then she leaves and she was like, that was weird. But then she bangs the car and she's like, oh yeah, I banged the car, sorry. And then they go look at the car and it's completely total. The whole car is just completely all messed up. And then the sheriff calls them and they're like, what the hell? Why did you bang up my car? And the sheriff calls and he's like, I do declare you need to go and check the television, son.
Yeah, he's
And I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
put
he's in the news. Like, there's a news reporter reporting on a murder, and the sheriff is behind her, going, "You looking at me, little man?"
yeah,
Like
and he's
to
like,
Jeffrey Donovan.
wave at me, boy. And
It's so
so
good.
they so then they realize that the other competing town was
Yeah, yeah. The Blair Witch Walk people were all murdered and like
yeah,
laid out. Yeah,
yeah. So then they're like, what the hell? So now they're trying to figure out what happened and like maybe the
we should
whoever
also like they some of them they keep seeing ghosts, but the ghosts are always like walking backwards, and that's
and yeah, and also the ghosts are like not the witch, they're just random kids a lot of the
they're just,
time.
yeah, random people. Sometimes it's kind of a witch, but not. It's not a great visual image, but it does make sense at the end of the movie when you're like, okay, I see what they were like doing.
Yeah. So then like and like the cool thing is that they keep the video aspect, like the footage that they have that they recorded the night before, they're like rewinding it. And every time they rewind it and like do it forward, another clip is revealed that wasn't previously there. I thought that that was pretty interesting. Um, and then so they're trying to figure everything out, and like eventually we get to okay, so eventually they get to the end, and like the Blair Witch has been messing with them, and they like kill someone.
You know, one of the girls is missing, and then they find her body. She's
Yeah.
dead. They're like, "Who did this? It had to be one of us." But we were all in the same room. You know, it's kind of it's like, and then they try to leave the bridges out. Like it's a bunch of stuff happening to
Yeah,
them.
they try to leave the bridges out, and then like at the end, they think it's one girl, and she's like, oh no, they found her dead, and so they're like, oh, it's actually another girl, and the other girl's like, it was me the whole time, and so they kill that girl, and then
They
like,
like kind of accidentally hang her a little bit, but
well, they do push her when she has a noose around her neck, but she did put the noose herself because she was
you
possessed by the
you
witch,
think
by the Blair Witch. So then the whole movie, and we forgot to mention this because it kind of ruins the whole movie, but the whole movie has been like shown from the point of view that like all the people have been arrested and
yeah,
they're being
a
interrogated.
detective's interrogation room. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
so then at the end you find out that the girl that they thought was, well, okay, you find out that when the goth girl like went to the grocery store, she didn't get in like a verbal fight with anyone like she thought. She literally killed every single person in that store.
Yeah.
And then like they showed clips of them actually killing the other group. Like they were the ones who killed those people. And then they find like the whole witch revealing herself to them and being like, it was me, I'm the witch. That never actually happened. What ends up happening is they or well, you don't know if it actually happened, but what you do know is the video footage shows her being super scared instead of being super intimidating. And so when it looks like they're actually fighting her and throwing her off the thing to like kill the witch, it actually looks like them just like killing this woman.
Yeah, she's like begging them to stop, and then
Yeah.
in their mind, she was like, do it,"
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing.
And she's like taunting
Yeah,
them. And she's like, why won't you do it? And then when you see the footage, she's like, please don't do this. And so then it ends with them being like, oh, you're all going to jail. And then it ends with, nope, it just ends right there. There's no real resolution to the movie.
well,
But
and okay, like the idea because they do discuss mass hysteria and stuff like the documentarians, and I like the idea. It's because it's like find people who really want to believe in the Blair Witch because they love the movie and got like into the lore, like making themselves believe they were possessed, and it's
right.
like that's a really cool idea. It's structurally like like you said, the interrogation thing, it's like just don't do it. Just show it at the very end.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
it's a
and
weak
it's
framing device.
especially because they have such good chemistry that like apparently the original idea was to like play the first half as this kind of almost satire and could play completely straight with them just kind of getting along and showing how like obsessed they are with the Blair Witch, talking to people. And so when the killing starts like halfway through, it's a complete 180, like a dusk till dawn, like, oh shit, what just happened? Which is a great idea and works in the film, except for the fact that you know that people are gonna die because it's bookmarked by interrogation scenes. So like
Right.
that ruins any sense of like, especially because like this movie is taking such a weird turn for a sequel to the Blair Witch that it almost needed there to be this kind of like, what the fuck is this? Like, is anything gonna happen in this movie? And like that would have worked, except for the fact that the framing device ruins that idea.
Right.
And so you
It,
know that scary things are gonna happen, so you're not really paying attention to the first half.
it also starts like with no like pretext. Just showing Jeffrey Donovan in the mental asylum, which I thought was like supposed to be like, oh, the end of the movie, he went crazy. But apparently it happens before the movie starts and it just is something else that happened to him. But that also sets you up to be like, oh, well, he's crazy, so you can't reliably know like what he's
Right, right.
And it's like it
Which
would be
which
much
works for
better if that's
his
all. Yeah.
yeah, and it works for his character because he is kind of unhinged. But yeah, oh, so apparently the original cut didn't have any of the interrogation shots, and you didn't find out that they were the killers until the last 10 minutes of the film, where in the movie you find out that they massacred the other guys about halfway through.
Then they keep cutting to like, oh, people are stabbing bodies. It's like, well, like you start seeing like a few second flashbacks of people stabbing bodies right after they wake up, being like, "We blacked out for 5 hours. What happened?" It's like, come on, movie. It's like, don't be
Yeah.
better. Don't do this. And it sounds like the director agrees. He says apparently the director is like, "Oh, they totally like mangled my idea," but you can see the good idea in there.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it still works. It's just like a little bit rough because you kind of
Yeah.
have to like look through the clear studio intentions. Um, but like, yeah, I just think that it could have worked. I mean, it works, but it could have worked way better if
Yeah, no, it's still when you kind of know what it is, it works, and you can almost see like the scenes of them trying to like figure it out is kind of them hyping each other up to believe more and more like crazy,
yeah. Well,
like when they
see,
start being like rewind the tape, and then suddenly all the ghosts start like walking backwards when they rewind the tape, and then it's like then they all decide like, oh, I'm seeing them too. It's like a cool idea.
See, but the cool thing is you never really know whether it's actually the Blair Witch messing with him or they're just like doing this mass hysteria thing because they kind of do both. Or they leave
Yeah.
it ambiguous enough that you because like Josh clearly is siding on the they was all in their heads where I always think it's the Blair Witch.
Well, I don't believe in the Blair
It's
Witch,
the
so.
only thing I believe in is the Blair Witch.
But then I haven't seen the third one yet, so who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll reverse my opinion.
Yeah, well, you're gonna take that journey alone. So yeah, and I think like this movie, I feel like this movie is hated for two reasons. The first reason is because it's not what people were expecting. They wanted another Blair Witch movie, and according to the third Blair Witch, they didn't even want that. But the Laugh by Myself worked a lot less when I'm the only one who does it and it's on screen. Are you frozen?
No, I was.
Oh, well,
I thought you were
the
making a point.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you get like the whole idea was like, oh, we just wanted another Blair Witch, but by the third one, you didn't really want that. Like you did want, like I commend this movie for taking a risk. I kind of wish the studio had taken a risk with him, but if there's certain movies like if you asked me to make a sequel to like Paranormal Activity, I'd be like, I don't know, or like the Blair Witch Project, I'd be like, I don't know, whatever.
Well, yeah, but like how many? There's like 9 paranormal activities, right, or
Yeah,
possibly more. It's like, and they're all successful, so it's like I guess people do just want to see the same movie
well,
over and
see, and
over.
that's the thing. It's like I
Yeah.
understand what the studio wanted, but like I personally I like that this movie went all out and tried to do something that people weren't expecting that still feels like it feel like okay. And here's the thing. I think this movie was a sequel to the experience that we all had living the Blair Witch of hearing of this nothing movie that might be a real documentary, might not be. It got huge. Everyone heard of it. Like by the time this movie came out, even though it was a year later, like all the parodies of the scene where where you see up her face are done. So it's like, yeah, this movie really went all out there. And I think that like it's kind of cool that they did that, even if like the studio kind of let the director down. I think like if there was a director's cut where you took out all that stuff and kind of kept the ambiguity, it would have worked a lot better. And I think people would have rediscovered this movie. I still think it's worth a watch. And I still think if you discover it, you're gonna like it. I just also think that as it is a little rough, and I can see why people don't like it. But no, I think it was a good attempt, and I think it's worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, I also think like there's just this kind of like I think the actors have a good like chemistry.
Yeah,
Whereas, and granted, I know it's like that's them like writing in a script, and then the first one, the director's like, oh, just ad lib whatever you want, and it's like, okay, you're not going to get great results when your whole movie's ad libbed and it's supposed to be scary.
yeah, and it
Uh,
seems like that's kind of one of the hard things about making a sequel to the Blair Witch, because like just like doing in my research, I found out that the original, like a lot of the folklore, like the famous story of like the Blair Witch leading out like the miners and then tying them up and killing them and stuff. That was just some random lady they ran into and they asked her about the Blair Witch and she completely made all that up on the spot, which is super cool and adds to the lore. But also, how do you continue that when half of your mythology is made up by some random lady that you didn't even get her name, you know?
Right. Yeah. I do like that though. I mean, that's probably how most ghost stories start, right? So
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah. So I think that that's the hard part. I think like as much as people don't want to admit it, a lot of the Blair Witch like love comes from the entire experience. And so the director of this, Joe Berlinger, he tried to do it the best way he could while making it original and making it interesting. And he just needed the studio to follow him, and they just followed him only so far. And so, yeah, I think it works. I think it's better than you think it is, but it's not the best.
if you want to see Michael Weston before Burn Notice, this is what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. He
Yeah,
showed up, he popped up in a lot of stuff. And Josh brought it up, but I will say there is so much good chemistry between the cast that it kind of makes up for any bad things that happen. Even like the goth girls, not super stereotypical, you know? They all have their own
yeah.
individual personality.
That is kind of like that is where it gets a little muddled too, though. And that's kind of where I was like, oh, I wonder like what his intent was with this, and like if it just kind of got lost in it, where they're all kind of like, and they talk about it in the movie, like the Wicca, the goth girl, the crazy, guy,
The
and it's
doc
like,
and the
oh,
documentarians.
yeah, and then like the documentary with the pregnant wife who miscarries, and it's like, oh, these are all people that society would suspect of being like evil, like, and and then it's like, okay, it's kind of interesting that it plays on that to be like, oh, she's goth, she's like evil and satanic, but then they kind of are at the end of the movie, so I'm like, what was the message? I almost feel like there was like a critique in there that didn't make it to like the editing room. You know what I mean? Like a directorial attempt
Well,
would
and
have.
I think like if this movie had been more put together, I think maybe the fact is like mass hysteria can hit anyone at any point. And like he brought these people who are very clearly from very different worlds, but it still affected them. And I think that's what he was trying to do. But
Yeah,
because we don't really like get that far into the mass hysteria and they show us right away that it's actually they're being possessed, it kind of takes away from that. Where like I feel like the possession, if you had to watch, if you think about this movie where the whole thing you don't know what happened until the last 10 minutes. The last 10 minutes where they show the massacre, it doesn't have as much weight. So the paranoia hysteria part really comes up and brings it up. And so that would have made that point a little bit more clear. But since they keep intersplicing, it makes it less clear. And so yeah, I just think that if there's a director's cut out there, I think it would work really well. Even now, I think it works, but director's cut would really help.
yeah. No, I agree. It's not like totally lost. You can see it there still. It's not like something like Solo where you're like, oh, like there's not a real movie in here anymore.
Yeah, like with
But
Solo, you have to make leaps.
so you're like, oh, there's like 20 minutes of like what a movie could have been that didn't happen. But in this, you're like, okay, I could see like the premise. This is like a funny premise, and it's kind of tongue in cheek too, which I appreciate. Like
Right.
it's very like in that style. So yeah, still worth watching, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it's a good idea, and I think you guys should check it out. And welcome to Halloween, guys. This whole month is October. Hopefully, we'll have a deep dive. I'm in the middle of writing it. And hopefully we have some more fun stuff. We also have 50 subscribers. So we'll be doing some fun stuff all month long. Hopefully we get William. He's taking a little hiatus. But come join us. I think we're gonna do video from now on. I like it. I like checking myself
I
out.
mean, this looks terrible, but
Yeah,
maybe
this
we'll
is
figure
bad.
it
Well, I don't care.
out.
No, this looks fine, but it sounds bad. This is gonna sound a little bit
Right,
rough
we
for
have
you
to
guys.
really step
But
up.
we can figure out everything else. So yeah, tell us if you hate it, if you absolutely hated this, or if you're slowly been falling in love with me for the last hour. I'll also accept those comments. But yeah, come join us next week. I don't know what we're watching next week. We had planned to watch all the Blair Witches for the month of October, but then William had to take a hiatus, and I'm not going to talk about Blair Witch 1 for an hour. And so we'll find some cool stuff. Oh, I have a very special movie. I'm hoping to get William on for that one. So we'll see if we can follow it. But it will be a very special, weird. Why did we make this? Maybe we'll bring another guest if William can't. But yeah. So join us, guys. Like and subscribe. Check out my YouTube page where I have my short films. Check out everything. And we will see you guys on the other side of the woods. Of the Blair Witch Woods.
There's a wave. I guess I could do that video.
Bye, guys. Bye.
It's all, I mean, it's like it's all cut out. That's the
Yeah, it's like when you move.